My name is Emily Carter, and until just a few months ago, I thought I had everything I'd ever wanted. Charleston had always felt like home. The cobblestone streets, the warm southern breeze, the sweet scent of magnolia in early spring. Every morning, I'd sip my coffee on the front porch of our white colonial house with blue shutters, while sunlight poured through the Spanish moss draping the oaks. My life was peaceful, safe, or so I believed. I'm 34 years old, an interior designer who runs a small home-based consultancy. I love bringing warmth into spaces, making a blank room feel like someone's story is written on the walls. My work kept me creatively fulfilled. My clients trusted me, and most of all, I had Jason, my husband of 7 years. Jason was charming in a way that disarmed people. He had a warm laugh, a strong handshake, and an easy confidence that seemed to fill a room. As a real estate agent, he was always on the go, meeting clients, staging homes, networking. I admired how driven he was, how he made people feel seen. That was the man I married. Or at least, the man I thought I married. Back then, we still shared Sunday brunches on our back deck. We had inside jokes. We'd fall asleep tangled in the bedsheets after talking about our dreams, his of owning a brokerage firm, mine of opening my own showroom one day. To the outside world, we were perfect. To myself, I was grateful. Not in a performative way, in a real, quiet way. I'd look at Jason sometimes when he didn't notice, and think, how did I get this lucky? That morning in early March, I was arranging fabric swatches on the dining table for my newest client. Jason came down the stairs, in a crisp navy suit, knotting his tie in front of the mirror by the foyer. I smiled at him. "You look sharp," I said, setting aside a pale linen swatch. He glanced at me, barely lifting his gaze from the mirror. "Yeah, this new client's pretty big. Got to look the part." Something in his voice didn't quite land right, but I brushed it off. Maybe he was just distracted. "You'll do great. You always close," I said encouragingly. "Yeah, well," he muttered, grabbing his car keys off the counter. Some clients are a little harder to convince. I didn't ask what he meant. I should have, but you learn later that sometimes, the things you don't say speak the loudest. That afternoon, I drove across town to meet my friend Maya for lunch. She and I had been inseparable since college. She was a therapist, sharp-eyed, but warm-hearted. As soon as I sat down, she asked, "You okay? You look, tense." I laughed, shaking my head. "Jason's just been off lately. Distant, cold, I don't know, maybe it's just stress." Maya gave me that look, the kind where she was trying not to say something she knew I needed to hear. "Emily, you've been saying that for 2 months. I sighed. "I don't want to over it. Maybe I'm just being paranoid." She reached across the table and took my hand. "You're not paranoid, you're perceptive. If something feels wrong, don't ignore it." I nodded, but inside I was still defending him. "Jason's just tired. He works too much. He'll come around." I had no idea I was already standing in the shadow of a betrayal I couldn't yet see. Later that night, we had dinner together barely. He was on his phone the entire time, tapping out texts between bites of salmon. I tried to make conversation. "I was thinking of finally renting that space on King Street for the showroom." He said, not looking up. "The showroom, you know, the space we walked by last month." "Oh, right, yeah. Do what you want," he said flatly. I stared at him for a beat. "Do I want? I thought we talked about this together." He finally glanced up. "Emily, I don't have the bandwidth for this right now." "Okay, this." My dreams were suddenly this. I set down my fork. "Jason, what's going on with you?" He blinked slowly, then put his phone down. "Nothing, I'm just tired. Work's been intense." I watched him carefully, trying to find the man I'd built my life with in the eyes of this stranger. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe we were just hitting a rough patch. Marriage had seasons, right? Maybe this was winter. But somewhere in the back of my heart, a quiet fear began to grow, a whisper that would soon turn into a scream. That night, as I lay beside him in bed, I stared at the ceiling while he turned away from me. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered, what if I don't know who he is anymore? Or worse, what if I never really did? That thought clung to me like a fog the next morning. Jason had already left when I woke up. No note. No kiss on the forehead, like he used to, just the hollow echo of his absence. I sat on the edge of the bed, the sheets still warm on his side. My hand brushed the pillow where his head had lain, but it felt unfamiliar, now, like a stranger had been there. Something had changed, and I could no longer pretend I didn't feel it. By mid-morning, I found myself rearranging the same books on our living room shelf for the third time, pretending I was working. In truth, I was avoiding the silence that had taken root in our home. The silence between us wasn't just a pause anymore. It was a barrier. A quiet, suffocating wall we kept adding bricks, two unignored text, one mumbled excuse at a time. That evening, I cooked his favorite honey garlic chicken with roasted vegetables. It had always been our dish. A comfort meal. A just because dinner. He walked in at 8:42 p.m., smelling faintly of cologne I didn't recognize. "You're late," I said gently, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "Client dinner ran long. Did you eat?" "Yeah, of course he did." My heart sank a little. The untouched food on the table suddenly looked ridiculous. "Jason," I tried again. "Can we talk?" He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "About what?" "About us." He looked at me like he didn't understand the question. "Emily, not everything has to be a discussion." I blinked, "But we haven't had any discussions. You come home late, you barely speak, and when you do, it's like you're somewhere else." He finally met my eyes, and for a split second, there was something cold behind them, something I had never seen before. "I told you I'm tired, can't that be enough?" I swallowed hard. Tired doesn't mean absent. Tired doesn't mean I stop mattering. He looked away, jaw tightening. "I can't do this right now." And, just like that, he walked upstairs, leaving me at the table with 2 plates of cold chicken and a head full of questions. 2 days later, I opened his laptop to email myself a file for a design board I'd saved there months ago. That was the only reason. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't that wife. But the browser opened to a page I wasn't expecting. A hotel reservation. 2 nights, Ocean View Suite. Hilton Head Island. The reservation was for next weekend. 2 guests. Booked under his name. My breath caught in my throat. There were no client meetings on weekends. There had been no talk of a trip. I clicked back and found photos. Smiling photos of Jason and a girl, blonde, barely in her 20s, wearing one of his shirts, snapping selfies in what looked like our guest bathroom. My guest bathroom, I felt a strange detachment, as if my body moved 10 seconds slower than my mind. I stood up, walked out to the backyard, and sat on the cold steps, my hands shaking as I clutched my phone. I dialed Maya. She picked up instantly. "Hey, I found pictures," I said quietly, "of him and her." Her voice dropped. "Where are you right now?" "Home. Stay there, I'm coming." Maya arrived 20 minutes later, and I opened the door before she even knocked. I fell into her arms like a child, the tears finally coming. The silence inside me cracked open. She led me to the couch, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and let me sob until I could finally speak again. "He brought her here, Maya. Into our home." Her eyes welled up with fury. "You didn't deserve this. Not after everything you've given him." "I thought we were happy," I whispered. "No, Emily. You were happy." He was lying. I looked up at her. "How do you stay standing after something like this?" She held my gaze. "You don't. Not right away. First you fall, and then, when you're ready, you get up. But this time, you don't just stand, you rise." The next morning, Jason came downstairs, casual as ever, reaching for his coffee mug. As if the ground beneath us hadn't shifted, as if the truth hadn't just torn through the seams of our marriage. I stood by the kitchen counter. The images from his laptop burned into my memory. I watched him sip the coffee I made. The betrayal tasted nothing like bitterness on his lips. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the mug. I wanted to ask him how long. I wanted to ask him why, but I didn't single quotes t. Instead, I said, in the calmest voice I could muster, "Jason, do you love me?" He paused, eyes flicking to mine. "That's a loaded question," he said. "No," I replied. "It's a simple one." He looked away. "I don't know," I nodded. My hands were trembling, but I kept my voice even. "Then let me make it easier for you. If you don't love me anymore, then leave." He stood there for a moment, completely still, and then he said, "Maybe I will." He walked out the door like he was going to the store. Like he wasn't walking out of our entire life. And just like that, I was alone. But in that silence, something stirred inside me. Something new, something sharp, not pain, not fear. Resolve. If he thought this would break me, he had no idea who I was about to become. The moment Jason walked out that door, something inside me snapped in, not in the way you'd expect. There was no shouting, no begging, just a strange stillness, like the eye of a hurricane. But beneath it, everything was shifting. For the first time in years, I looked around our house and realized how much of myself I had shrunk to fit him. The soft color palettes he liked, the meals he preferred, the parts of myself I'd put on hold so he could chase his career, and now, he had chased it straight into another woman's arms. No explanation, no apology, no remorse. So fine. Let him leave, but I wouldn't be the same woman waiting at the window for him to come crawling back. I would become the woman he would regret leaving, the woman he could never have again. The first thing I did was change the locks. It was petty, maybe, but the act of doing it felt symbolic. A boundary. A declaration. I remember standing at the door with the locksmith, watching, as the old keys were tossed aside like they meant nothing because they didn't, not anymore. Messy breakup, he asked gently, trying to make conversation. I offered a faint smile. Just cleaning house. The days that followed were a blur of shock, sadness, and small, stubborn acts of survival. I stopped answering Jason's texts. There were only 3, and they were all logistical. Can I come by to get my golf clubs? I left my gym bag in the laundry room. I'll be out of town this weekend. We'll talk when I'm back. We would not be talking. Instead, I began cleaning not just the house but my entire life. I deleted our photos from my phone, removed his calendar alerts from my reminders, canceled the wine subscription he signed up for under my name, and then, I opened my laptop and started the process of reclaiming my name. I filed for a business license under Carter Interiors, my name, no longer ours. I began designing a brand new portfolio, one that didn't play it safe. I added bold textures, rich colors, dramatic concepts I'd once been told were too risky. Jason had always wanted me to keep my business small. Low stress, he'd called it, but what he really meant was low threat. I wasn't interested in being small anymore. A week after he left, Maya and I sat on the floor of my living room with takeout and a bottle of wine, surrounded by swatches and floor plans. Is this all from one client? She asked, picking up a mood board. No, I said. It's from a vision I've been putting off for years. She raised an eyebrow. You're launching your own line. I smiled. Not just a line. A studio, a full boutique firm. Custom design, curated spaces, everything. She stared at me like I'd just said I was running for mayor, double quotes, Emily, This is huge, I know, I said. And I'm done waiting for permission. But as I was rising, Jason was circling. The very next day, I received a message from an unknown number. Hope you're okay. I've been thinking about you. I didn't need to ask who it was from, not even a week since he left, and he was already reaching back. Not out of guilt, out of insecurity. They always do that, don't they? They ruin the house, and then check the ashes to see if you're still warm. I didn't reply. I didn't even let it shake me. But I did screenshot it, and save it in a folder labeled receipts. Not for revenge. Not yet, but for the moment when I would look him in the eyes and let him feel the weight of what he'd thrown away. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, longer than usual. Not picking myself apart. Not wondering what I'd done wrong. Instead, I saw a woman staring back who was waking up, and I whispered to her, "You are not broken. You are becoming." That whisper became my mantra, 3 quiet words that echoed louder than Jason's goodbye ever did. It was no longer just about surviving what he did. It was about rising in a way that made his absence irrelevant. I started waking up earlier, lighting candles before sunrise, playing soft jazz in the background while sketching new concepts for the studio. My days weren't empty anymore, they were on fire. I poured myself into my work with a hunger I hadn't felt in years. Jason wanted freedom. Good, let him have it. Because I was about to show him what a woman does when she's no longer holding back. 2 weeks after filing my LLC, I met with a local property manager who owned a vacant storefront on King Street. It was a space I had walked past for years, always telling myself someday. Now, someday had a lease. And the lease had my name on it. It was dusty, echoing, and smelled like peeled paint, but to me, it was sacred ground. Maya helped me paint the walls over a weekend. My cousin shipped me hand-carved shelving from Asheville. I sourced second-hand velvet chairs and framed prints I had created years ago. but never dared to display. This wasn't just a studio. It was me. Out loud. But as I began building something real, Jason's life started leaking through the cracks again. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram when a photo popped up from someone we used to know, a mutual friend we hadn't seen in ages. There he was. Jason, at a rooftop bar. His arm wrapped around a girl, who couldn't have been older than 24, blonde, polished, wearing a tiny gold necklace with the letter S. The caption read, "Congrats to these two lovebirds engaged and glowing." Engaged. 2 weeks after walking out on me. I blinked. Read it again. My breath caught, not because I wanted him back, but because ... How easily he had replaced me. 7 years, just erased. Like a coffee stain on a tablecloth. The next morning, Maya came by with coffee. Before I could even sit, she asked, "Did you see it?" I nodded. "Yep." She looked at me, bracing for impact. "You okay?" "I am," I said. "But not because it doesn't hurt." "It does." "Then how?" I looked her in the eyes. "Because now I know the truth. I wasn't the problem. I was the pause between the girls he could impress. I was the quiet chapter he wanted to skip." Maya didn't say anything. She just nodded, slowly. She understood. Later that day, while organizing my studio, I found an old photo of Jason and me tucked behind a stack of sample books. I stared at it for a moment. We looked happy, but now I realized I had been trying to be happy for both of us. I tossed it into the trash without hesitation. He'd moved on like I was a footnote, but he forgot something critical. I had a pen too. And I was still writing. That same week, I got a call from a new client, Vivian K., a hotel investor visiting Charleston from Savannah. She had seen my portfolio online and was looking for a designer to renovate a boutique hotel lobby. "I don't want anything safe," she said. "I want bold, unapologetic. The kind of design that slaps you awake." I smiled. "I think I can help you with that." She laughed. "You sound fearless." I looked around my studio, still smelling faintly of fresh paint. "Let's just say I'm done hiding." The day I presented my mood board to Vivian, she leaned back in her chair and said, "You know, I've interviewed 5 designers. None of them had your fire." My hands trembled slightly as I packed up the presentation. "Thank you," I said quietly. She narrowed her eyes, as if seeing straight through me. "Someone broke your heart, didn't they?" I looked up. "Yeah, but I'm not interested in staying broken." She nodded. "Then let's build something that reminds you who you are." That evening, I walked home with a signed contract and a mind buzzing with ideas. For the first time since Jason left, I wasn't thinking about him. I was thinking about color schemes, textures, statements. I was thinking about the future, but the universe has a strange sense of timing. As I opened my front gate, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jason. "Heard about your new studio. Looks nice. Proud of you. By the way, I didn't leave you to hurt you. I just wanted something different." I stared at the screen, stunned. Different. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't respond. Instead, I looked up at the stars and whispered, "You wanted different. Well, now, you get to watch me become unforgettable." And that's exactly what I did. The boutique hotel project with Vivian took off like wildfire. Within 2 weeks, I was commuting to Savannah twice a week, sketching ideas on the train, holding design consultations in sunlit cafes, and breathing life into a space that once looked forgotten. Every chandelier, every velvet accent, every brushstroke of deep emerald on the lobby walls was a reclamation of my talent, my time, my worth. I was no longer the woman waiting at home. I was the woman people were starting to talk about. The transformation didn't just happen in my work, it happened in me. I traded my neutral wardrobe for bolder choices. Burgundy heels, gold earrings, power blazers in colors Jason used to call too loud. I let my curls fall naturally instead of taming them back. I wore red lipstick for no reason at all, except that it made me feel like I was done apologizing for taking up space. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw less of the woman he left, and more of the woman he never truly saw. But something strange started happening. The more visible I became, the more he reappeared. It started small, a like on one of my Instagram photos, an artsy shot of me at the Savannah hotel site, laughing, mid-conversation, then another dot, and then a DM. "You look happy." I remember that laugh. I didn't respond, but it was clear. Jason was watching. And that was fine, because now, every photo I posted, every update about my studio, Every glowing review from a client wasn't just success, it was a silent message. You lost me. And I didn't lose myself. One Friday evening, I was invited to a local design showcase in Charleston. My name was listed among the featured designers. For the first time in my career, I had a spotlight all to myself. I stood near a display of one of my signature staging concepts, lush, moody, modern, vintage. Guests complimented my vision. I smiled, thanked them, mingled with fellow creatives. And then I saw him, Jason, standing by the entrance with a drink in hand, alone, wearing the same navy suit he used to wear to open houses when he wanted to impress. Our eyes met. He froze. I didn't flinch. I lifted my chin, smoothed my dress, and turned back to a guest, asking about my process. I didn't owe him a moment. Not anymore. But later, just as I was about to leave, he approached me. "Emily," he said, gently, "you look incredible." I gave a polite smile. "Thank you. I saw your studio last week. The new signage. It's beautiful." I nodded. "I'm proud of it." He looked down at his hands. "It's weird seeing you like this." I tilted my head. "Why?" "Because for so long, I didn't think you had this in you." There it was. That quiet confession, wrapped in his regret. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "That's the difference between us, Jason. You wanted someone easy. I became someone unforgettable." He exhaled slowly. "You were always my safe place, Emily." I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. "And now I'm the place that reminds you what you lost." I walked past him without another word, not because I was angry, because I was done. The next morning, Vivian called with news. "I want you to design not just the lobby, but the entire second-floor lounge. A full rebrand." I sat down slowly. "That's huge. You've earned it," she said. "People are noticing. You're the name on everyone's lips right now." As I hung up the phone, I looked around my studio. There were no photos of Jason here. No shadows of what used to be. Only blueprints, vision boards. Sunlight pouring through the window. The sound of possibility. Jason had left me to chase something new. Something different, but now he was drifting through the noise of a life that was crumbling behind his curated Instagram feed. I was building something lasting. He wanted freedom. I gave him fire. And now, I was the woman he could never have again. But that didn't mean he'd stop trying. Jason's reappearance became more frequent, subtle at first. A glance across a gallery, a forwarded email about a potential client, a casual message asking how Savannah was treating me. It was obvious. He wasn't looking for a second chance. He was looking for reassurance that I hadn't moved on without him. He was looking for proof that I was still standing in the same place he left me, but I wasn't. I had moved, grown, climbed, and for every inch he tried to re-enter, I built a wall 10 feet higher. Meanwhile, my career was blooming like it had been waiting its whole life to finally breathe. Vivian's hotel project became the talk of the local design world. I was invited to speak on a creative panel in Savannah. Then came a podcast interview. Then an unexpected email from a national design magazine. I sat in my studio, rereading the subject line, "Feature opportunity, bold women in Southern design." Me. They wanted me. I pressed my palms to my desk, my heart thudding with disbelief. And that's when I heard it. A knock at the studio door. I opened it to find Jason, holding a paper bag of takeout. "Figured you haven't eaten. Thought I'd bring you something." I blinked. "Why are you here, Jason?" He stepped inside without waiting for permission. "I saw you in that article last week. You looked, different." "I am different." He hesitated, setting the bag down. "I mean that in a good way. Honestly, I've been thinking a lot lately." I crossed my arms, waiting. Let him say it. "I messed up," he said finally. "I thought what I wanted was something exciting. Something new. But the truth is, nothing feels like home anymore." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You didn't leave because you wanted excitement, Jason. You left because you couldn't handle a woman who was growing." He looked away. "I never stopped loving you," he said softly. I stepped closer, but not for the reason he hoped. "Then why did you lie to me? Cheat on me? Replace me before the ink on our marriage even dried?" I didn't know what I was doing. I was scared. I nodded. "I believe you, but fear doesn't undo betrayal. And love isn't real if it disappears the moment things get hard." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "I don't want you back," I said. "But I want you to remember this moment. Because from here on out, every time you see my name, You'll remember exactly what you gave up. He left without another word. And I didn't cry. Not this time. I closed the door, walked back to my desk, and reopened the email. This feature wasn't just a highlight, it was my arrival. But life has a way of testing you when you're just starting to rise. 2 weeks later, while finalizing plans for the Savannah Lounge, I got a call from my contractor. Emily, we have a problem. Apparently, the city permit had hit a snag. Something about zoning restrictions. A delay of at least 3 weeks, maybe more. And the client, growing impatient, I hung up. The breath knocked out of me. Everything I'd built was balancing on this project. The buzz, the reputation, the magazine feature. It all depended on one successful launch. And now, everything was wobbling. That night, I sat on the floor of my studio with a glass of wine and every emotion I'd been holding back rushing to the surface, not because I missed Jason, but because I had worked so hard to get here. And, suddenly, it felt like it could all be taken away again. Why now? I whispered aloud. Why does it always fall apart when I start believing I deserve more? I closed my eyes. And then I remembered what Maya once said to me, sitting on this very floor. You don't just stand, you rise. So I rose again. I reached out to a legal contact Maya knew, got a zoning consultant involved, and prepared a revised proposal that could bypass the delay. I scheduled an emergency meeting with Vivian. I offered alternate designs that would work with a staggered timeline. I stayed up 3 nights straight. I didn't sleep. I didn't complain. I just fought, because I wasn't just building a business. I was reclaiming the life. I almost gave up for a man who didn't know what to do with a strong woman, and when I presented the new plan to Vivian, she leaned back and smiled. Emily, she said, I think I chose the right fire. Those words lit something inside me I didn't even realize was still waiting to be ignited. For so long, my worth had been tied to being a good wife, a supportive partner, someone who stayed quiet to keep the peace. But standing across from Vivian in that sun-drenched hotel conference room, I finally saw myself through someone else's eyes, not as someone's wife or someone's ex, but as a woman who was building something no one could take from her. I smiled. You didn't just choose fire. You chose a woman who stopped apologizing for her flames. The weeks that followed were a blur of decisions, pressure, and sleepless nights. The Savannah Hotel project had become the centerpiece of my career. And the stakes had never been higher. Everything mattered now. The lighting, the upholstery, the precise balance of elegance and risk in the textures and tones. And somehow, even in the middle of it all, I started getting calls from clients I'd once only dreamed of. A beach house in Hilton Head. A downtown Charleston law office renovation. A modern farmhouse just outside Atlanta. Suddenly, I wasn't chasing success. It was chasing me. But with every win, something else kept tugging at the edges of my peace. Jason, he didn't stop reaching out. Not dramatically. Not begging. Just lingering. A text here. Saw your name in that article, amazing work. A voicemail there. Just wanted to say I'm proud of you. You've come so far. He wasn't trying to rekindle what we had. He was trying to keep a door cracked open. But what he didn't realize was, I had already built a new house. And there was no room for ghosts. One afternoon, I ran into an old mutual friend at a local market. Hey Em, she said cautiously, glancing around. You look amazing, like ... really good. I smiled. Thanks. Things have been busy in the best way. She hesitated. I didn't want to bring this up, but Jason's not doing so great. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, he's still with ... her. But word is, it's Rocky. She's younger, but she's not you. He keeps comparing everything to what he had. There it was. What he had. It hit me like a wave, how much time I'd spent mourning a man who never really saw the fullness of me. I wasn't built to be his comfort. I was built to create, to build, to rise. And he was never strong enough to stand beside a woman like that. That night, I stood in my new studio, surrounded by fabric swatches and mood boards for the Hilton Head project. A soft breeze drifted in from the open window, carrying with it the distant hum of the city, the world I was now a part of on my terms. I pulled out my journal and wrote a single sentence across the top of the page. You were never afraid of losing me. You were afraid I'd find out I never needed you. But just as the dust began to settle, Vivian dropped a bombshell. Emily, she said, her voice tight over the phone. We've got a major donor coming to the hotel launch. He's thinking of investing in more boutique properties across the South End. He's interested in seeing your portfolio. That's incredible. I said, standing up from my chair. When next week? Private preview. But there's one thing. She hesitated, my heart skipped. What? The donor, is Jason's firm. They've been looking to get into high-end hospitality investments. He'll be there. I stood frozen, phone pressed to my ear. Jason. Again. Walking straight into the center of the biggest moment of my career. I had two choices. Back down. Let his presence unnerve me. Shrink or show up. Stand tall. Be the woman who once loved him deeply, but now loved herself more. And so, the night of the private preview, I dressed with purpose. I wore a structured white pantsuit, clean, elegant, powerful, a bold red lip, gold earrings that caught the light every time I turned my head. Confidence in every detail. As I entered the hotel lobby, my design glowing under ambient lighting. I felt it, that quiet, thunderous pulse of pride. And then I saw him, Jason, standing near the bar. His expression, unreadable. He approached slowly. Emily, he said, almost breathless. This place, it's stunning. I looked around, smiled gently. It's mine. There was silence between us for a moment. Then he said, I always knew you were talented. I just didn't know you could be this. I met his gaze with calm steel. That's because you never gave me the space to be anything more than your shadow. He opened his mouth to respond, but I raised my hand. You don't get to be surprised now, Jason. You get to remember. And with that, I turned and walked away toward a room full of investors waiting to see my work. He wasn't the center of my story anymore. I was. But being the center of your own story doesn't mean the world stops testing you. In fact, that's usually when it starts, just 3 days after the private preview. While I was riding the high of praise, handshakes, and promises of future projects, I got the call. Vivian's voice was tight. Emily, something's happened. My heart dropped. What is it? The investors backing out. Jason's firm, they're citing concerns about personal entanglements and brand image. I blinked. You mean me? She hesitated. They said working with you would be a conflict of interest considering your history with Jason. He didn't push back. My throat tightened. So he stood there. Watched my work speak louder than it ever has, and still let them pull the rug out from under me. I'm furious too, she said. But listen, I still believe in you, and we're going to figure this out together. I hung up the phone, trembling. It wasn't just a project. It was momentum. Recognition. A door I'd fought tooth and nail to pry open slammed shut again because of a man who once promised to protect me, and now he was sabotaging me. Quietly, politely, with a smile and a handshake. I sat in my car in the parking garage, staring at the steering wheel. For the first time in months, I felt that familiar old ache creeping in. What if I never really escape him? Not emotionally. Not professionally. What if I was always going to be that woman, the one who almost made it, but whose past kept pulling her down like an anchor? I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel and whispered, I did everything right. I rose, I rebuilt. Why does it still feel like he has power? The silence didn't answer. But something inside me did. Later that night, I called Maya and told her everything. She didn't gasp. She didn't say, oh no. She said, then we pivot. You don't crumble, you adapt. But how do I compete with someone who has a whole firm behind him? I asked, voice shaking. You don't compete with him, she said. You eclipse him. That word, eclipse. The idea that something brighter could simply block out what came before. And so, I pivoted. I reached out to every client who'd ever complimented my work. I pulled late nights, drafting new proposals. I recorded a video of the Savannah Hotel design story and uploaded it to my socials, not just as a highlight reel, but as a message. In it, I spoke directly to the camera. When someone tries to erase you, don't waste your time begging them to see you again. Become impossible to ignore. It went viral. Within 72 hours, I was flooded with messages from aspiring designers, from betrayed wives, from women who saw themselves in my fire. You're telling my story. I didn't know I needed to hear this today. Thank you for reminding me I'm not broken. The next week, a boutique design magazine called. They weren't just offering a feature. They offered me a column. My own voice, my own platform. But just as the clouds began to part again, the storm wasn't quite done with me. Vivian called. Again, double quotes, Emily, the investor. He's not just pulling out. He's moving forward with the hotel redesign, but he's hiring another firm to finish it. I froze. What? It's already in motion. You're being replaced. I couldn't breathe for a moment. Who? I asked, though I already knew. She answered anyway. Jason's firm. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood in the middle of my studio, my name on the door. My work surrounding me, the scent of fabric samples and fresh paint in the air, and I let the rage settle like dust on my shoulders. Jason hadn't just left. He was trying to erase the version of me that dared to rise after him, but he didn't realize he wasn't the storm anymore. I was. And this time, I wasn't going to just weather it. I was going to reshape the sky. When I found out Jason's firm had taken over my project after stealing the investor, the momentum, the spotlight, I didn't fall apart. Not because it didn't hurt. It did, deeply, but because I had no more time to waste on falling. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about restoration. I would not let my story be reduced to a footnote in his power play. The next morning, I drove to Savannah, alone. I needed to see the hotel one last time. The walls I had sketched, the custom velvet benches I'd fought for, the space that, in many ways, was the turning point of my new life. It was quiet when I arrived. Too quiet. The concierge recognized me instantly, eyes widening with guilt. "Miss Cartwright, I'm sorry." "No need," I said calmly. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to remember." I walked through the lobby, my heels echoing on the polished floor. The sunlight spilled across the marble in patterns I had designed myself. Every corner held a fingerprint I had left behind, and I whispered, under my breath, "They can replace me, but they can't recreate me." Back at my studio, I locked the doors and spread out a clean board blank, untouched, waiting. I began again, not with the Savannah Hotel. That chapter was closed. But with something bigger, I created a new project. One not bound to a donor, or an old name, or a man in a suit. It was called the Restoration Project. A pop-up interior design, series 6 spaces, 6 women-owned businesses, 6 full makeovers, pro bono, public. Bold. I would tell their stories, highlight their work, transform their spaces and film the entire journey. It wasn't just design, it was storytelling, redemption, art, and this time I didn't need anyone's approval to make it real. I called Maya that night. "I'm done waiting for doors to open," I told her. "I'm going to build the whole damn building." She laughed, breathless. "That's the Emily I've been waiting to hear again." "No," I said. "That's the Emily I had forgotten existed." The next few days were a whirlwind. I launched a campaign online, explaining the concept, told my audience, now tens of thousands strong, why this mattered. Why women-owned businesses needed design, not just survival. Why beauty and visibility weren't luxuries, but necessities. Within 48 hours, I had hundreds of applicants. Within a week, I had sponsors. Within 2 weeks, I had a camera crew. And then I got the text. "Jason, I saw what you're doing. You really turned it around, didn't you?" Funny how some people crumble after a fall. And others build empires. It wasn't an insult. It wasn't praise either. It was the confused murmur of a man who once had power over me, watching it slip away like water through his fingers. I didn't reply. He had lost the right to access my victories. On the day we filmed the first space transformation, a small bakery, run by a single mother of 3, I stood in the finished room as she burst into tears. "This doesn't even feel like my shop anymore," she whispered. "It feels like a dream I gave up on a long time ago." I hugged her, eyes misty. "Then let's call it reclaimed." The camera caught everything, and when the video launched, it reached over 1 million views in the first 72 hours. The comments poured in. "This is more than design. It's healing. I've never cried over tile choices before." She turned her pain into purpose. That's power. I was no longer the woman whose husband left her. I was the woman who built something bigger from the ashes. I didn't need to ruin Jason. I just needed to outgrow him. And I had completely, but the final test hadn't come yet. Because just as I wrapped the 3rd episode of the Restoration Project, I got a call. It was from a woman with a soft, cautious voice. "Hi, you don't know me, but I'm the woman Jason left you for." I sat down. She continued, "He told me a lot of things. That you were bitter, controlling. That you didn't believe in his dreams." I stayed silent. "But I started watching your series, and I don't think any of that was true." She took a deep breath. "I just wanted you to know. I left him." My breath caught. She paused, then added, "I think he still wishes he was standing next to you." I swallowed hard, eyes burning. "Then, I hope," I said gently, He watches everything I build from a distance so far, even his apologies can't reach me. Asterisk, I hung up the phone and just sat there, in anger. Not even in sadness, but in this strange, still clarity like the final note of a long, painful song. For so long, I had been tangled in the echo of Jason's voice, his absence, his betrayal, his careless exit. I had fought to rise, to reclaim myself, to prove that I was more than what he left behind, and now, even the woman he left me for was gone. Even she saw through the illusion. And suddenly, it felt like all the noise, every echo, every ghost had finally quieted, because now, the only voice left in the room was mine. I walked outside to the tiny rooftop garden above my studio. The Charleston evening was warm and still. The city buzzed softly, billowcars humming, wind rustling through the trees. Life moving forward. I leaned on the railing, looking up at the stars. I made it out, I whispered to the night. And I didn't even realize I'd been caged. The next morning, I got an email that stopped me in my tracks. Subject, invitation to keynote. Women Who Rebuilt It was from the Southern Creators Summit, a prestigious event I had once only dreamed of attending, let alone speaking at. The organizer wrote, "We've been following your journey. Your story is powerful. Your work is bold. We'd be honored if you'd share your voice on our main stage this year." Main stage. Not just a panel. Not a footnote. Center stage. And that's when it hit me. Jason gave me silence, but I found something better. I found my voice, and now the world was asking me to use it. The weeks leading up to the event were a blur of preparation, nerves, and unexpected emotions. Not fear, but something deeper. Like the final steps of a marathon where you've already passed the pain and are running on nothing but purpose. On the day of the summit, Maya met me at the hotel with coffee and a garment bag. "You ready?" she asked, smiling. "As ready as I'll ever be." She unzipped the bag and revealed a custom navy jumpsuit. Elegant, fierce, completely me. I slipped it on, stood in front of the mirror, and barely recognized the woman staring back. This wasn't the version of me who cried on the kitchen floor after Jason left. This was the woman who built something louder than his absence. Backstage, I could hear the host introducing me. "Our next speaker is a designer, a creative visionary, and a woman whose story has inspired thousands. She turned heartbreak into heritage. Please welcome Emily Carter." I stepped onto the stage. Blinding lights, a crowd of hundreds, silence, and then applause. I smiled, took a deep breath, and began. I used to believe my story started when someone chose to love me, but I was wrong. My story began the moment I chose myself. The room was silent, hanging on to every word. I gave everything I had to a man who couldn't hold it. And when he left, he took my silence with him. What he didn't know, what I didn't know yet, was that he left room for something more powerful, my voice. And now that I've found it, I'm never handing it back. The crowd rose to their feet, tears, not for a tragedy, but for a transformation. After the event, I stepped outside into the evening air, heart still pounding with adrenaline. A woman approached me, tears in her eyes. "I just left a man who made me feel small," she said. "You reminded me I don't have to stay broken." I hugged her. "You never did." And just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed. Another message from Jason. "I watched your speech. I don't have words. You were incredible." Then another. "I don't know if it means anything now, but I was wrong. About everything." I stared at the screen for a long moment, and then I deleted the message. Not out of spite, but because it no longer deserved space in the life I fought so hard to reclaim. And that's the part Jason will never understand. It's not that I hate him. It's that he's irrelevant now. His name used to carry weight in my chest, used to twist my stomach, fill my eyes with tears, steal the air from my lungs. Now it's just a shadow I no longer flinch at. But I know this much: he will remember me. Every time he meets a woman who knows her worth. Every time he tries to charm someone who refuses to dim herself just to be easier to love. Every time he reaches for a life of depth and fire and finds only surface and smoke. He'll remember me. After the keynote, invitations poured in. Speaking engagements, brand collaborations. A publisher reached out about turning the restoration project into a book. People wanted to hear more, not just about design, but about resilience. I started filming a new season of the series, this time spotlighting women who rebuilt their lives after personal devastation, divorce, illness, betrayal. Not just their spaces, but their stories. One of them, a former nurse who lost her husband and home in the same year, looked at me during our final reveal and said, "You made me feel like I'm allowed to start again." And I realized, that's what I had become. Not just a designer, a mirror, a reminder of what's still possible, especially for those who thought everything was lost. A few days later, I was having coffee with Maya at our favorite corner cafe, sunlight flickering through the window. She smiled at me over her latte. "Do you realize how far you've come?" I sipped my drink and looked around my studio down the block. A notepad full of client calls waiting, a heart that no longer ached for the past. "I do," I said, "and I'm finally proud of it." She leaned in. "If Jason showed up today and said he wanted you back, what would you say?" I laughed softly. "I wouldn't say anything." "Why?" "Because silence is a full sentence now. And sometimes, no answer is the answer. But life, of course, isn't without irony." A week later, I saw him, Jason, in the flesh, at a mutual friend's art show downtown. I hadn't expected it. I had just walked in, laughing with a new colleague. My hair curled, heels clicking, wearing a green silk dress that I once told myself I'd never be confident enough to pull off. He looked the same, but smaller somehow. He saw me, froze, then walked over slowly. "Hi, Emily," he said, almost unsure of himself. "Jason," I nodded, calm/composed. "You look amazing, thank you." "I saw the new episode last week," he said, voice low. "The one with the woman who lost her husband." "That was powerful." I smiled. "She was powerful. I just helped her see it again." He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes full of thoughts he didn't know how to say. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he murmured. "I'm sure you have." He looked at me, then really looked. Not as someone to impress or manipulate, but as someone he couldn't reach anymore. "I didn't realize who you were when I had you." "I know," I said softly. "That's what hurt the most." "I was a fool?" "I don't disagree." He chuckled, dryly. "Is there any chance you could ever?" I cut him off gently. "No, Jason. There isn't. Not out of anger. Not bitterness, just truth. I'm not her anymore, and she—" I motioned toward myself, glowing and free. "She doesn't fit in the life you left behind." He nodded slowly. "I get it. I do." "I hope you really do," I said. "Because from now on, every time you meet a woman who won't settle, you'll see me." He exhaled, hands in his pockets. "Goodbye, Emily. Goodbye, Jason." And, this time, I meant it. I walked out of the gallery into the cool night air. Stars glimmering overhead. No ache, no weight, just peace. Because closure didn't come with a kiss, or an apology, or a perfect ending. Closure came when I realized I didn't need him to finish the story. I had become the ending I once begged him to write with me. Asterisk, and the most beautiful part. I didn't need him to read it. That night, as I lay in bed with the windows open and the hum of Charleston life drifting through the air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, not just peace, but wholeness. Not the kind that comes from getting everything you wanted, but the kind that comes from knowing you never needed what you lost to begin with. The next morning, I made tea, barefoot in my kitchen, sunlight streaking across the floor. My studio was already buzzing mails, calls, plans. The restoration project had just landed a regional sponsorship deal, and my next season would now be distributed nationally, but for the first time in a long time. I didn't rush into the day. I sat quietly, just being. I used to think healing would come like a lightning bolt, one grand moment of clarity or closure. But it didn't. It came in whispers. In ordinary mornings like this one. In the calm of knowing I had nothing left to prove. Later that week, I was invited to speak at a women's business mentorship event. The room was filled with women of all ages, some fresh out of college, others rebuilding after life's detours. I stood before them with no script, just honesty. I spent years building my life around someone else's comfort. I was gentle, quiet, careful not to take up too much space. And still, I was left. I paused, letting the silence hold. But that heartbreak, it gave me back to me. It taught me that I am not too much. I am just enough for the right things, the right people, and most of all, for myself. A woman in the front row began to cry. Another nodded, clutching her notebook. This was the real work now. Later that night, as I walked home from the event under the golden Charleston streetlights, I passed by a bookstore window. Inside, on a display table near the front, sat a magazine with my face on the cover. The Voice of Revival. How Emily Carter rebuilt herself and the design world. Along with her eyes stopped in my tracks. the reflection of the glass catching both the cover and my own face. There she was, and here I was, and for the first time ever, they were the same woman. When I got home, I found a small package waiting at my door. No return address. Just my name in handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened it carefully. Inside was a copy of my favorite novel, the one I used to keep on my nightstand during the early years of my marriage, the one I left behind when I moved out. Tucked inside was a note. I found this while cleaning. I thought you might want it back. I was wrong about a lot of things, but mostly, I was wrong about you. I stared at the signature, Jason. For a brief second, I felt a flicker of the old ache, but then, just as quickly, I smiled, because I didn't need the book back, and I didn't need the apology either. I placed it on my bookshelf, not as a wound, but as a chapter closed. The next morning, I walked into my studio, sunlight pouring through the windows, and flipped open a fresh notebook. At the top of the page, I wrote, "This is where it begins again." Because letting go wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one where I was no longer rebuilding from ruin, but building from power. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of who I was becoming, because I knew she was worth it all. The tears, the betrayal, the nights I couldn't breathe through the heartbreak, the silence that echoed after Jason left, the lies I had to stop telling myself just to survive. All of it led me here, not to perfection, but to peace. It's strange how, when you finally heal, the past doesn't vanish. It simply loses its grip. It becomes something you can hold in your hands, without it burning your skin, something you can remember without reliving. And I remembered it all. As I stood on the edge of the rooftop that evening, the city stretching out below me, the wind lifting my hair, the lights of Charleston flickering like stars. This was where it all began, and where it all ended. I glanced down at my phone, notifications buzzing. Texts from sponsors, messages from women I'd never met telling me how the restoration project had helped them leave a toxic partner, start a business, take back their voice. But one message stood out. It wasn't from Jason, it was from me. A scheduled email I had sent to myself exactly 1 year ago. I had written it the week after he left. I opened it. Heart THUDDING. Subject. In case you forget, you don't need to be strong today. You just need to keep breathing. One day, you'll look back and thank yourself for not giving up. One day, you'll no longer want him back. One day, you'll realize you were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. Keep going. She's waiting for you. I didn't even realize I was crying until the wind dried the tears on my cheeks. I'd waited a whole year to become the woman I wrote about, and now, she was me. A week later, I stood in a brand new space, my space, a downtown showroom and creative hub, filled with light, texture, warmth, and unapologetic beauty. The walls were lined with photographs from past restoration episodes. A gallery of triumph. I was no longer just Emily Carter, the designer. I was a brand, a movement, a voice, and I was about to launch a scholarship for young women studying design and architecture, specifically those rebuilding their lives after divorce, abuse, or abandonment. Because sometimes, your biggest heartbreak becomes your greatest ministry. At the launch party, as I looked around the rooms surrounded by clients, colleagues, mentors, and strangers who had become family, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel fully until now. Joy, not the kind that asks for permission, not the kind that waits for someone else to stay, but the kind that comes from finally being home in your own skin. Near the end of the night, Maya raised a glass and tapped it gently. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, smiling through tears, "to Emily, the woman who turned her pain into purpose, who reminded us all that you don't have to go back to the fire that burned you, just because it once kept you warm." Everyone clapped. I laughed through the lump in my throat, and when they turned to me, waiting for my words, I simply said, "He thought leaving me would break me, but all he did was set me free." Later that night, after the last guest had gone and the music had faded, I stood in the center of the showroom alone. The lights dimmed, the energy still humming in the air like a heartbeat, and I whispered, not for anyone else but just for me, she was worth everything I lost, because she was, because I was. And finally, I didn't need anyone else to tell me so.